Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about how to choose a math curriculum, right? So I do have some notes prepared that I do want to look at just to make sure I share the right information with you. But again, I want this video to be catered to those parents who are looking for the right curriculum, whether your child is a traditional learner on a normal pace, or if your child is considered mathy, or if they need a more gentle approach because it may take them a little bit more time to understand various math concepts. Regardless of where your child fits in that spectrum, this video is for you. First, I would like to say that when you're looking for curriculum, try your best not to fall into the temptation of looking at all these YouTube videos and all these curriculum reviews and these unboxing videos, because we're full of excitement as homeschool moms, and when we find the right curriculum, we intuitively want to share that information and share that curriculum with you, the viewer. However, I do want you to understand that every curriculum does not fit every household, every parent, or every child. So when you're watching those videos, please keep that in the back of your mind, that that parent purchased that specific curriculum based on the needs of their specific child, which may be completely different from your child. So do the research, take the time, give yourself grace and patience throughout the process, because it may take some time for you to figure out what works best for your son or daughter. So with that said, let's go ahead and let's get started. When looking at your curriculum, you do want to first determine whether or not math will be the driver of your homeschool. And what I mean by the driver is whether or not math dictates, or whether math drives maybe grade level, or if math maybe drives your approach to teaching math, or not teaching math, or whether your approach to your homeschool is centered around math. Let me give you an example. If your household is driven by math in terms of grade levels, you may decide that if my child is on this level of math, which may be beyond their age level on the traditional chart, or it may be under their grade level on the traditional chart, then that's going to determine what grade my son or daughter is in within my homeschool: first grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, and so forth. Okay. Now, when I say if math is going to be a driver in your approach for homeschool, what I mean is consider whether or not math is one of those core subjects where your son or daughter will spend a lot of time in. They're just not going to do the lesson in the book and that's it. You may have them do the lesson in the book. You may have them do some math facts. You may have some other resources that you want to pull in to ensure they not only understand the concept that is being taught, but they understand other methods or approaches to solving that problem in a different way to get the same answer. And you may also require your child to do a certain number of hours per day for math beyond the lesson. So when I say determine whether or not your homeschool is math driven, I'm specifically speaking about that. If you are math driven, then your philosophy will be a little bit different from those individuals who are just using math as a normal curriculum. They're doing a lesson and they're moving on to the next subject. Something else you also want to consider is that the math curriculum that you're purchasing for one child may not fit for all your children. And I want you to be comfortable with that, because sometimes as parents, we do try to save the dollars because curriculum is expensive. But when it comes to math, you really want to make sure that it's not only fun for your children. And when I say fun, I don't mean they're running and they're excited to do their math program. All kids aren't like that, even if they're good at it. But what I mean is make sure it's appropriate for their learning style. Make sure it's something that's not a daunting task for them. And then when they are doing the program, that they don't have a glaze over their eyes. Okay. So your one child may be excited about a program and it may work great for them, but it may not work as well for your other children. So you really need to know what works best for each child. So in this process, as I'm giving you some tips to consider before you purchase your curriculum, and before you start researching your curriculum, you may want to write down some of this information and then align it to each one of your children, just to make sure that you're thinking about your math purchases for each individual child and not as the collective unit for everyone. What you want to consider second, the first one is math a driver, right? The second thing you want to consider is, do you want a spiral approach to math, or do you want a mastery approach to math? And let me explain what that means. So spiral approach is a curriculum or a program that starts off with one concept, and they may do a little bit of mastery for that concept, but they'll move on to a different concept, maybe in a chapter or two. Although they're moving on to another concept, they are also bringing the original concept that your child may have learned in that first chapter within the second chapter. And what they've learned in the first and second chapter, they're bringing it into the third chapter and so forth. And that's what they mean by the spiral approach. They're bringing back previously learned concepts later on in the process for the purpose of review and for the purpose of ensuring that your child didn't forget the basic concepts they learned originally. And that's really important in my opinion, because math concepts normally build upon each other. So you don't want to lose the information that you've learned in the beginning as you're doing problems in the end. Spiral approach can have a positive or a negative impact on your children. Some children feel as though once they've learned something, they really don't want to go back for review, or they really don't need to go back for review because they're quick learners, they understand the concept, they can utilize the information that was taught previously in future concepts without having to do, 10 or 20 problems just as a review. And if you see me looking over, that's at my timer because I only have a set number of time to complete this video, so bear with me here. A specific example with the spiral approach is, let's say in the first few chapters or the first chapter, your child is learning about 2 by 1 digit addition math problems. And then the next chapter, they'll go to 2 by 2 digit math problems. And then they're going to move on to subtraction. And when they're on subtraction, they're going to have a few problems there just to see if they remember how to do 2 by 1 and 2 by 2 digits. Now, when you get back to addition as a lesson, the book or program may have jumped to 4 by 2 digits because they're saying if you understand the concept of 1 by 1 and 2 by 2 or 2 by 1 digits, it may not be necessary for me to teach you 3 by 1, 3 by 2, then 3 by 3. So they may just jump to 4 by 2 addition problems because they're assuming that the child understands the pattern and they get it and they move on. Okay, so some examples for spiral approach programs are like your Saxon Math, your Singapore, and even Math Mammoth. Math Mammoth actually has curriculums for both sides of the spectrum, but right now we're talking about spiral. So again, that's your Saxon Math, your Singapore, and your Math Mammoth. Those are just a few examples that have spiral approaches. There are many out there, but again, I'm just giving you a few examples. So you want to think about whether this approach works best for your children. Does your child need consistent review? Do they forget information easily and they need that kind of refresher throughout the year? What about if they don't? Then you may want to look into a mastery approach. Now, a mastery approach basically says, I'm going to teach you this concept until you completely understand it. You see it in your dreams, okay? So using the same example, they may start off with 1 by 1 digits, and then 2 by 1 digits, and then 2 by 2. And then they'll go to 3 by 1 digits, 3 by 2, 3 by 2 digits, and then 3 by 3. and then 4 by 1, and then 4 by 2, and then 4 by 3 digits, and then 4 by 4 digits. So they're taking incremental steps and teaching you the same concept, addition, before they move on to the next concept, subtraction. And they'll do the same thing, okay? And you normally don't have a section where they go back and they spiral through or they review what you've already learned, because they're doing it in such slow increments that it may not be necessary for them to go back and provide a review, because you may be on the same topic for a month. As to spiral approach, you may be on a topic for a week or maybe even a day or two, okay? The mastery approach may not work for all children. And that's because some children, like my son, they get sick and tired of doing the same thing. If they get it, they want to move on. They don't want to stick with the same topic for a long period of time. It causes frustration, it gets him annoyed, and he says, I know this, why do I have to do 20 to 30 problems on the same thing? Can I please move on? So in that instance, maybe a spiral approach would work best for the child. And again, bringing in the previously taught concepts just to make sure that they can recall information. Now, some children may need a mastery approach because they may be very forgetful, or the child may not be comfortable with moving on from topic to topic so quickly without feeling confident enough that they understand the material. And some children may need that incremental step to teaching, and that's okay. Spiral approach and mastery approach have nothing to do with your child's intelligence. It has nothing to do with your child being more mathy or being more traditional or needing more time. It has nothing to do with that. It's all about how they learn. Do they like an incremental approach to learning, taking their time, mastering and fully comprehending a topic before they move on? Or are they okay with, which is mastery, or are they okay with learning information for a set of problems, moving on to a totally different concept, but when they move on to that different concept, they have a few problems from the previously taught concept just to make sure they understand? Are they okay with that? Or are they okay with both? Because you do have some curriculum that may be a little bit of both. So you may want to consider that type of information when you are thinking about what type of program to purchase your son or daughter. Some examples of mastery curriculum are your MCP, Modern Curriculum Press. You have your Math UC. And like I said earlier, Math Mammoth also has a mastery approach to their curriculum as well. Next, you want to determine whether or not your child is mathy. Do they learn at a traditional pace, or if they need more time to process information? So when I use the word mathy, or you hear the word mathy, I want you to first understand that that terminology has nothing to do with whether or not your son or daughter gets the answers right. If your son or daughter can do math problems and they can get the majority or all the answers right, that doesn't automatically mean that they're mathy. Mathy means your son or daughter, they can see the patterns in math. They can use logic in math in order to pull previously taught concepts or use information that they have in their back pocket to kind of do problems that may not give them directions on how to do it. So here's an example. If you give your child a 2 by 1 multiplication problem, if you give them a 4 by 2 multiplication problem, or a 5 by 3 multiplication problem, can they solve it with minimal frustration and with minimal support or assistance from you? If they can, then that's a good thing. That means your child may be mathy because they're able to use the logic behind what they learned by the 2 by 1 digit math problem in order to solve larger, more complex problems. In addition, if your child is mathy, sometimes they will get the answer wrong, okay? And the reason why they're getting the answer wrong is because a lot of mathy students like to solve their problems in their head. Many times they will get the answer right, okay? But in some instances, they may not, and that's okay too. In addition to that, a lot of mathy students like to avoid writing out the steps for their problems. So when you are doing a math problem with them, it's really important for them to write out every single step of the process. One, it's going to be of great assistance if they get a problem wrong. They'll know where their error was and they'll know where to go back and make that correction. Two, it'll get them in the habit of writing out steps to particular to all problems, regardless of how simple it is or how easy they can do it in their mind, because that will help them transition from arithmetic to algebra later on down the line. With your mathy students, just because your son or daughter is mathy doesn't mean, one, they can do the curriculum on their own, or two, they have to have one type of those approaches that I spoke about earlier, spiral or mastery. A mathy student, a traditional paced student, or a student that may need more time can be on a spiral curriculum or a mastery curriculum. Again, remember, it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with whether or not they're mathy or not. It's all about just their style and their approach to learning information. And don't be surprised if you have a mathy student and that student wants a mastery approach because they like the incremental steps of learning. Or if don't be surprised if your mathy student may take a bit longer to solve problems, and that's okay too, because they may need more time to process the information and solve the information. But in cases where your students need a lot more time to process information, if you notice they're taking 10, 15 minutes to complete word problems at the 3rd and 4th grade level, 5th grade level, then what you may want to do is start timing them, regardless of if they're mathy or not. Start timing them when completing multi-step problems, because as they get older, you want them to become more efficient in problem solving, and maybe work with them on different strategies to kind of help them become more efficient and quicker in the solution process, or in the process of writing down their information to get the problem. Because as they get older, if they want to go to college, or if they might go to high school or middle school in the public school, depending on what's going on in your household, they're going to have to take tests, and you want them to understand that they can't take 15 and 20 minutes to complete one problem. So as you're talking to them about this, and as you are bringing in skills to teach them how to become more effective, just remember, you don't want to lose the quality of the work. You still want the answer to be right. You still want it to be neat and lined up and things of that nature. The next thing I want you to think about in determining what curriculum you should choose is yourself. You, parent, you, instructor, you, the teacher. Are you comfortable with math? Are you comfortable with teaching elementary math, middle school math, high school math? How comfortable are you? If you're not comfortable with teaching math, don't automatically assume your child, regardless of if they are mathy, traditional, or need something at a slower pace, don't automatically assume your children can do math on their own. There's a lot of curriculum out there, like Saxon, for an example, that is open and closed. You give your child the textbook, they open it up, they read the lesson, and you're going to assume they can comprehend what they learned and they can go ahead and do the problems. That may not work for everyone. You may actually have to teach even with open and closed textbooks, okay? So don't just pawn the curriculum out to your children and think you don't have to participate, support, or even instruct. You still want to do that. Even great mathematicians have a support system. great mathematicians, PhD majors in mathematics, they still have a teacher. Okay, the children need someone to bounce ideas off. They need someone to talk the process through. They need someone to narrate the process to. They need someone that they can ask the question why. And in math, it's all about asking the question why. Why did I get this answer? Why did I have to use these steps? Why was this the best approach? Is my answer correct? How can I prove it? You want to have those types of conversations with your children, regardless of what grade level they're in, and regardless if they're a traditional paced learner, if they need more time, or if they're mathy. So if math is not your thing, you may want to consider outsourcing it, right? You may want to consider outsourcing it by getting a tutor. You may want to do video learning where their instructor is online or on a video. You may want to completely outsource it to maybe a co-op or something if you're that uncomfortable with it. And as the child gets older, I would say starting in like 5th grade, the math can become a little bit more challenging. So you may want to consider those things if it's not your strong suit. Also, what you may want to understand is that the back of the textbook, even in the teacher's manual or your solutions manual, the answers are not always correct, guys. The answers are not always correct. So you need to consider if your child is getting an answer over and over again and you are getting the same answer, but the back of the book is not the same answer. Is the back of the book correct? Is the back of the book even accurate? Is the answer key accurate? So don't be surprised if you run into that situation. So hopefully your curriculum has some type of 800 number that you can contact. But if they don't, you have to find a different method of ensuring that the approach your son did or your approach was actually accurate. Okay? Especially when you get into the higher grade levels, like I would say Algebra 1 and beyond. Statistics show that I think the number was, it was like a ridiculous number. It was like 60% or something. It's a 40 something or 60 something percent of the math problems were incorrect. That's crazy, right? Or there were multiple solutions that you can get, but the back of the book or the answer key only provided you one solution. But there were other alternative ways of getting to that solution, or there were different possibilities to the answer. And if you're not getting the answer keys one specific answer, then they would say your problem is wrong. So you want to consider these things when you're looking at your curriculum as well. Also, another tip, when I buy curriculum, I like to buy the solution manuals that explain the steps. I don't just want the answer. I need to understand the steps that the curriculum creators went through in order to get that answer, because I in turn need to explain that to my son or daughter if they don't understand the steps to get there, or if they have their steps written out. I need to know where their error was in order to pinpoint the problem, have them understand why that's a problem, redo the problem in order to get the correct answer. Now, if your son or daughter is mathy and that's why you're uncomfortable with teaching math, consider this. Consider getting a traditionally paced curriculum and then including supplements or resources for your mathy student. And that way you're meeting in the middle. The traditionally paced curriculum will allow you to be a little bit more comfortable in teaching the concepts, especially in elementary school, up to pre-algebra, or maybe up to Algebra 1. And then during those stages, giving your children additional resources like Beast Academy, Ed Zakara's Challenge Math, and some other challenging math supplements out there, just to keep their mind going and keeping the problem solving skills fresh. And those books normally have all the steps written out in the back of the book or in the solutions manual to help you parent and to help the child understand how to do every single step of the process. So just because your child is mathy doesn't mean you should fear teaching them math. You can use a traditionally paced curriculum that meets your needs and their needs. Their needs, the basic math; your needs, maybe going a little bit slower going through the steps of the process, so it's easier for you to understand as you're teaching, but you're pulling in other resources to ensure that your child is still challenged. If math is also not your strong suit, you may want to really consider reading the chapter. Regardless of what curriculum or approach you choose, you may want to consider reading the lesson or the chapter in advance, YouTubing and Googling supplemental videos so that you can get an understanding. I've had to do that. I totally forgot about multiplying fractions with different denominators and how to convert decimals to a fraction, fraction to a decimal. I forgot those things, guys. So when it came time for me to teach my son those things, although I think I'm good at math, I had to go to YouTube, watch various videos. I had to watch the curriculum videos that I purchased for my son in advance of him watching them, so that I was prepared to teach the concepts. And if I didn't have time doing that, if I didn't have time to do that, then I literally would watch the video. I would assign those videos to him and I would watch it with him, and I would quickly get the concept, but that way I was refreshing my memory or learning it as he was learning it in order for me to effectively teach it to him. So consider doing that regardless of the approach or curriculum that you choose. Next thing you want to consider is whether or not you want to teach your children via an online mechanism, a workbook, or a textbook. What works best for your child? Is your child a person who likes to be online, who can do their problems online, maybe have a sheet of paper and pencil next to them to solve the problem and get the answer? Do they work well on using a screen? Do they need direct attention? Meaning, do they need someone in front of them teaching? May it be live, you the parent being in front of them physically, or maybe a video, them seeing someone teach it and going through the problems and examples on the board? Or are they more workbooky, where they like a workbook with multiple concepts on it? Or do they like a workbook with a lot of color on it? Are they easily distracted via the screen? Are they easily distracted by having lots of colors or multiple images or multiple concepts within a book? Are they comfortable with having a textbook where they have a lesson that teaches them step by step how to do it, gives them examples, and then gives them some problems on how to do it without the need for having you, the parent, teacher, there with them to walk them through it? Are they independent or not? These are the questions that you really want to answer, because you don't want to give a child an online curriculum when they don't like working online. They don't want to stay on the screen. They're not into it. You don't want to give a child a resource that requires independence when they're not ready for it. You don't want to give a child a workbook where they have to solve all their problems in a little box within the notebook, and they're the type of person where they want to write out all the steps and their paper has to be neat and they erase to make sure everything is lined up and perfectly neat because that's their personality. You want to make sure that you align your child's personality and their learning style to the curriculum that you're actually going to use. So, will workbooks work? And even with your workbook, do you want a workbook that has multiple concepts? Will they get distracted by that? Do you want a workbook that has one or two concepts on it per page? Does that work for them? Is that too slow for them? Do you want a workbook that has lots of colors and images? Will they be distracted? Do you want a workbook that maybe has examples in the lesson and they have to use a separate sheet of paper to copy the problem and answer the problem on a different sheet of paper? Does your child even like to do that? Like, for example, my son, although we're using Saxon, he does not like to copy the question onto his sheet of paper and write it out. He doesn't like to. However, all the other aspects of that curriculum work for him. So that's just something we have to deal with. They do have workbooks within that program where the problems are written out and they can write the answer there. But he doesn't like that because it doesn't provide enough space. The space is insufficient for him. And he likes to learn online as well. So we do Beast Academy online. We have the Beast Academy materials where he can physically read the book. So he likes to read the book in front of him. the course book, and then he likes to solve the problems out in the workbook. He loves to solve the problem in the workbook rather than copying it somewhere else. And then he goes online and he does the online version of the workbook as well, because he likes the visual appeal of it. He likes the screen. So in that case, my child likes multiple ways of doing it. So then what I do, I cater to that. I provide him those multiple avenues of learning through those various mechanisms. But the purpose of me bringing this topic up is because it's really important to know what your son and daughter prefers to do. How do they prefer to learn? And FYI, just in case you didn't know, when you are writing within a workbook, those are normally called consumables. Consumables allow your child to write within the material itself, but you're not going to be able to utilize that material for the next child if they're doing that. So if you are choosing a workbook consumable style, then you may want to copy the pages and have them work on it, or they just may have to copy that problem on a different sheet of paper and then solve the problem that way. We talked about learning style a little bit thus far in this video. Consider your child's learning style. What is your child's learning style? Are they auditory? Do they need to hear the information more than once? Are they visual? Do they need to see the example? Do they need to see you go through the example on the board or on a sheet of paper? Is your child kinesthetic? Do they need to work with manipulatives? Do they need to feel the problem in order to understand the concepts? So get a feel for whether or not your son or daughter is auditory, kinesthetic, where manipulatives are needed, or if they're visual, where screen time may work great for them and doing it on the board may work great for them. Use their senses. I think it's really good to use your senses: sight, hearing, and touching. I think it's a very useful thing for every child to go through, regardless of what your core style is. So just because your child's primary style may be one particular thing does not necessarily mean you don't want to bring in resources or examples using other styles. Okay, that may be a good thing. That teaches your child how to learn math visually, kinesthetically, and using auditory listening skills as well. Now I'm going to have to go, but I will come back. So I'm going to leave for a bit and I'll come back and I'll finish up this video.